All right, folks, welcome Cannabis Lab to the second episode of Elevate Your Grind. We are here recording live at the global headquarters for One Plant in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. We've got an amazing episode for you today. We've got Andrew Felix and we've got Brady Cobb of One Plant. Two amazing interviews. I think you're really going to enjoy this, hearing their stories and hearing how they got started in the industry. As always, this episode is brought to you by Cannabis Lab. Cannabis Lab is the #1 networking group for cannabis professionals in South Florida. If you haven't checked it out yet, check out our website at joinclab.com. If you're not doing anything for the Super Bowl, or even if you do have plans for the Super Bowl, we've got better plans for you. Come check out our Super Bowl party hosted by Ricky Williams, sponsored by Real Wellness and my company, Real Cloud Pros. Come check us out. We're going to be hanging out with Ricky Williams. There's going to be other celebrities there as well. Check it out, joinclab.com. Again, this episode is brought to you by Real Wellness. Real Wellness is one of the best CBDs that I've ever tried because it is not only CBD, it is a full herbal formula. Go to their website, realwellnessherbal.com. And then finally, by Real Cloud Pros. We are IT experts for the cannabis industry. Whether you're just getting started, you're already established in the cannabis industry, and you need help with your technology, check us out, realcloudpros.com. Ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy the interviews. Well, everybody, welcome to episode 2 of the Cannabis Lab podcast, Elevate Your Grind. I am honored today. We have an amazing guest. If I gave Robert a list of the top 3 people I want to interview, you would definitely be on it. Please welcome Brady Cobb, CEO of One Plant, Soul Global, or it's Bloom of Wellness now, correct?
Correct. That's going to be our new public company. But in Florida, we are One Plant Florida.
Very cool. So as you guys can tell, I'm a huge personal fan of One Plant. You guys are probably going to incriminate myself here, but my favorite dispensary in the state of Florida. I'm a huge fan. And I'm honored to interview you, especially because you're a former Seminole.
Yeah.
So, and
hopefully we're on the return back.
Well, you were there in 1999, correct, for the championship?
My freshman year was kind of hit highs on my freshman year, national championship, undefeated season. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I was there for Bowden's last years. It was not nearly as fun.
Yeah, it was a good year.
But so very cool. You went to Florida State. So, you know, one of the more interesting things that I think people explore about you is your family history in cannabis, right? And of course, your dad. And, you know, I was talking to Robert earlier and made a joke, when's the movie coming out about your dad? Because the things that he'd done in his life, he ran weed for Pablo Escobar, he ran a race team at Daytona, was hanging out at Studio 54, bought Eric Clapton's house, rented Coco Chanel's boat, and then, you know, to really get into it, he was the first one to assemble that dream team of defense attorneys that would later become OJ's defense team.
Correct.
You know, and that's just what we know publicly. So tell us a little bit more about your dad, kind of in his days being a smuggler, and then really what happened after that too.
Sure. So, you know, my dad was known as Dollar Bill. We called him Dollar Bill, Wild Bill. He was just a perpetual dreamer. To him, the glass was permanently half full. It wasn't half full. It was overflowing. So, poor cotton sharecropper from Jay, Florida, just outside of Pensacola, joined the Air Force at 17 to run away. To no longer wanting to farm cotton. Okay. And ended up in Daytona, got a Hawaiian Tropic distributorship from basically Miami to the Keys. Being a redneck, moves to the Keys, gets 3 acres, has for some reason thinks it's a great idea to have horses down there and a whole farm and a barn. Colombians are moving 100,000 pounds of weed down the road in the late 70s and their truck breaks down. They ask him, can we move this into your garage? Into that barn you have over there, give you $100,000.
Wow.
1977. He goes, sure, no problem. Throws it in the garage. They're in the garage. Bing, bang, boom. Next thing you know, come back the next day, pick it up, and he's like, when do we get to do this again? Fast forward, and he's the figurehead of a $300 million smuggling ring. 13 shrimp boats, never caught a shrimp. Basically, his general plan came from Colombia to Cuba. Cuba, the small boats met up. And then they took it up right past where all the enforcement was focused, which is here in South Florida, and moved it right up to North Florida where he was from, where it's creeks. If you've ever been up on the Gulf Coast, north of Steenhatchee to Pensacola, very desolate, a lot of creeks, a lot of rivers, a lot of streams, not a lot of enforcement.
And I'd read an article that they had actually opened a field office up in Pensacola because of your dad.
Yeah, Judge Nick Geeker, who's now in the 3rd District Court of Appeal as a judge, he was interviewed by a good friend of mine who's actually working on where he put together an entire screenplay pitch deck.
Very cool.
That we still have. We're just trying to find the right partner. But Judge Geeker, on one of the recordings, you can hear him very clearly say when he was interviewed, I had to go to D.C. and meet with my superiors to get a budget to open a field office in Pensacola because of Bill Cobb, because we're trying to figure out why all these rednecks are riding around in 24-karat gold Rolexes and Mercedes-Benz.
See, that's incredible. I've always had an affinity for, and it's weird to use this term, organized crime, because I truly think that some of the people in organized crime are some of the greatest entrepreneurs that we've seen. They're just not following the rules.
Correct.
Right? And if your dad, as you said, has done this in modern times, he'd be you. But
yeah.
So, one of the stories I read that was just really cool, and I'm sure I can sit here and talk to you for hours about this, was that he had about 80,000 pounds of weed on a shrimp boat.
Yeah.
And he went under a bridge, they dropped it off, and they didn't realize that coming back, they couldn't get under the bridge.
Took the whole fly bridge off and just kept on rolling.
That's incredible.
Yeah, my dad actually met my mom. We're born and raised here in Fort Lauderdale. My mom worked at WorldJet, and my dad landed his plane there, and she was a fuel receptionist.
Said,
do you want to go to lunch in Martinique? And she got on the plane, and off they went.
That's an incredible story.
Yeah. But I still have the signed cards from F. Lee Bailey and Johnny Cochran. Congratulations on the birth of your son, Brady. It's an incredible. It's part of my DNA. It's part of who I am, and just did it my own way.
So, actually, I appreciate you saying that right then. So you were born around the time of your dad's trial. It was a different life before you were born. How did you feel about what he had done growing up? Because again, from everything that I've read, and I'm not a professional journalist, it seems that his encounter with marijuana at the end of his life is really what had you follow in his footsteps in cannabis. So how did you feel up until that point when you saw how much it actually helped him, knowing what you knew beforehand?
So for me, I found out and kind of put the pieces together when I was younger. And then, obviously he brought me up to speed. I didn't see him a whole lot, but from the time I was probably 2 until the time I was 15, 16, my parents, the only time I've ever seen them really get along was either at my wedding or when they were getting ready to yell at me for having a 1.8 GPA. And I walked into a diner in Tallahassee and they were sitting talking to each other like they loved each other. That was the first time I actually saw them together. And they were happy at that point because they were going to focus their energy on yelling at me. So, it's always intrigued me. I'm a surfer, been a surfer my whole life. So the cannabis kind of culture and surf culture very closely intersect. It's always been a part of my life. I was always had a sense of pride for what he did, Looking at it, once I became a little bit more mature, it kind of the desperado element of it, you're like, what were you thinking? At that big of a scale. But for me to see how much it helped him when he was dying, and he died a very painful death. Bone cancer is probably as bad as it gets, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone. So it helped him and provided him a tremendous amount of relief, and it just had me at a point once I went to law school, and I'm going, what is prohibition? How is something that helps people, that obviously has a very clear medical use, still being ignored by DC? And I was a lobbyist. I was trained by Jim Scott at Jim Scott. I ran a government affairs office and worked with them in Tallahassee. Worked my way up through those channels, quite candidly, interacted with a lot of other free organizations in the cannabis space in that process. The Tim Rivers and the Kairosis of the world. We all were working in Tallahassee. And, I'm in this because I want to see cannabis be something that's a true medical option for people. I'm not in this because there's dollar bills. It's part family and want to follow my father's footsteps, as every son wants to do, but it's also part, I'm a huge believer in the plant. And once I had a better education, both from trying and then also becoming a believer in the plant, to me I'm proud of what he did. I think it was pretty stupid and brazen. I think if you look at any movie, I don't care if it's any movie depicting anyone that's been on the wrong side of the law, whether it's Scarface or it's American Gangster, they don't stop when they're ahead. And that was my father's family stand. They had plenty of opportunities to pull the ripcord to be done, and he didn't. So his idea was to go around the law and just say, to hell with it, I'm going to do this because I have a product that people want to spend $200 a pound for that I can buy for $40 to $50 a pound and make a lot of money. I don't mind making money either, but my true passion is let's change the law. Let's change the law and let's be an early mover so that once the law is changed, we're there as a premium flower company.
That's awesome. And I want to get a little bit more into you and your background, kind of into your background, but really what you're doing with one plant. There's one thing I did want to call out there that I hope everyone recognizes. You mentioned that he had a 1.8 GPA.
Yes, I did.
That is a 1.8 GPA. I think there's way too much emphasis on formal education. To see a man of yourself in the position that you're in right now, to say that story is incredible to me. I think a lot of my slacker friends growing up actually have gone on to be the most successful. So.
Well, that was my sophomore year after I pledged. I was a walk-on the FSU
track and cross country team, and when I walked off, once I realized I wasn't really going to be able to run in any meets because I wasn't fast enough, we had guys that qualified for the Olympics on our team, so I was like, yeah, what are you doing? I went and pledged a fraternity, and that was the result of a full pledge semester. I graduated with a 3.1, certainly wasn't the top of my class. I graduated law school from Barry, which is a lower tier law school, with a 3.1, 3.2-ish, something like that. And, God and my dad helped teach me, and my stepfather, Mitch, who's been a father to me, and my mom all taught me how to see angles. And I think that's just something that it's got to be in your DNA. When I say see angles, I mean, became a lawyer, and I had the real privilege of being trained by Ed Pizzuali and Jim Scott, two of probably the best Republican strategists in the game in Florida, and Ed on a national level. And I got to see kind of where business and politics and law met. And if you look at the cannabis industry, that's what it is.
Yeah. Going from a 1.8 GPA to probably working on some of the most important bills in the cannabis industry right now just goes to show you your effort that you put in at a great school like Florida State doesn't really matter when it comes down to it. So you get involved in lobbying, you're involved in the policy side of everything, and I'm sure you get the itch to go into business, and you could have gone anywhere in the country and probably had a much easier, much cheaper point of entry, Colorado, Washington, California, but you chose Florida. Florida has got to be the most expensive state to get started, especially at the time when you purchased a license. You didn't just get it through the licensing process. So was it just your affinity for Florida, being from here, that wanted to make you open it here? What was the attraction to Florida with such a high price?
For me, I looked at it in there's two pieces to it. On the pure business side, it's kind of business, politics, and law. It's my home state. I lobbied nationwide, I lobbied DC, but Florida's Florida. This is where I live, this is where I raise my kids, this is where I'm from. I wanted to be in Florida. Mm-hmm. From a business side, it's the best market in the U.S. I don't care what anybody says. Yeah. And I have this debate with other industry professionals. I was just on a panel yesterday in Miami for the Miami Chamber of Commerce, and somebody said Florida's the number one fastest growing state behind Oklahoma. I go, that stat may be a stat, but Florida is the number one state. And I say that because you look at it from, again, seeing the angles, which I think is a critical component for anybody in an emerging industry. Least amount of licenses, vertically integrated, meaning you have to do all three sides, which is a benefit and a curse. Yep. Immense blue sky as far as you can see, with a patient population that is exploding, and if in a rec market, whether it's now, 2022 or 2024, you're looking at the largest tourist destination in the world, so everyone over the age of 21 who's coming down here has the opportunity to be a consumer. Florida is an amazing place. I wanted to be here solely because I could have went to California. I had friends go and be very successful in Colorado. But where I've been successful is I grabbed the best growers out of Colorado and California and moved them here. And why did they want to come here? Well, if they were sitting in this chair and I wasn't, they would tell you they came here because they wanted an opportunity for some of that blue sky. The price per pound in Colorado plummeted. Price per pound in California plummeted. Overall sales, they're there, but the taxes are so high, the black market's better than the legal market. I was just in Colorado last week, went and toured a bunch of dispensaries. And if I was there 5 years ago, the flower difference between Florida and California wouldn't even been close. Or excuse me, Colorado. Colorado was the top of the mountain. I was there now. I brought some of our flower out there. Our flower was better than anything I saw in a dispensary.
That's incredible.
Which I called the growers and I go, you're doing something very, very right. So keep doing it.
I've had the opportunity to try one of your brands in California, and then, of course, I said I go to one plant quite often. Northern Emeralds, we'll give them a little plug here. It is incredible. One plant, the Mac 1 is one of my absolute favorites. The fish whistle is great. I've had ebony and ivory, so I commend you on that. And, I can tell you, the one thing I think that was awesome for you guys is when you opened, and I know you opened before you opened the physical location in Boynton, is it was after smokable flower was passed. So when you walk into a one plant location, and I want to get further into the business model because I love how you built it, it does kind of feel more like a California or Colorado dispensary with the flower being featured. You know, you go into another, and we won't mention them by name, but other dispensaries down here, and you see a lot of products that are unfamiliar to people, and tinctures and creams and oils and stuff like that. Do you think the timing of what happened in Florida with smokable flower really helped you guys kind of hit the ground running?
Oh yeah, I mean, it made the business decision very easy on the model, you know, and I also don't think anyone anticipated a vape crisis, but that also made the business model decision, that was a validation. But for me, it was always, people want to consume flower, and that's been the traditional mode of delivery for cannabis for 100 years, probably more than that, thousands of years. So why mess with that model? And the other piece of the business model that I give a tremendous amount of credit to my chief strategy officer, Mike Bonner, on is when Mike joined me and came from a logistics world and a banking world, you know, doing supply chain and logistics for companies like Target, you know, big national retailers, international retailers. I had this whole plan laid out in the conference room. We were opening, it was very much the plan of every other large MMTC in Florida. Open as many dispensaries as humanly possible, as quickly as humanly possible, and we'll figure out the rest. So, you know, with the partnership with my realtors, Scott Allen and Rob Foster at Tower Realty, we went through and created a great portfolio of dispensaries. And Mike goes, what are you doing? I go, what do you mean, what are we doing? We're following what everyone's doing. He goes, that's not why we're here. That's not what we're doing. It was a very good kick in the mouth for me to say, I've cherished the role in my legal practice as a trial lawyer when I tried 14 cases to verdict, to being David hurling rocks at Goliath. You know, I sued the state of Florida multiple times, won, in licensing disputes. I've taken on big national, international corporations, won. So he goes, why are you doing what everybody else is doing? I go, okay, what do you want to do? And he goes, for the last 100 years, if you wanted cannabis, you called your dealer and they brought it to your house. Yep. Why are we, pardon my French, fucking with that? And that was an exact quote from Mike, and I sat there and I went, okay, so what do we do now? Well, he brought over some key personnel from big logistics companies like Amazon and from Coca-Cola. And right here to my right is where my director of marketing is sitting, and one day, once we had kind of an idea what a delivery network would look like, I said, hey, Chris, we throw a post up real quick that we have statewide delivery. We had one delivery van at the time. I go, in my head, and I'm known to be chaotic in this way.
Statewide in the state of Florida. Got it.
So
okay.
I'm known to be a little chaotic, and there's a method to the madness. And we put the post up, and about 4 or 5 minutes later, Mike Smuts, our director of operations, calls me and says, did you guys put something on the internet? And I went, why? He goes, the phone system is gone. It's crashed.
Wow.
And to me, they go, oh my God, what are we going to do? I go, now we can fix it because we can go buy vans. I already have a fleet deal with Ford. But we have to see if people actually wanted it to begin with. So it was a great validation. The two things could happen in that moment. And it was a moment that I'll always remember and cherish. As, you know, one day, hopefully this is much bigger, because we were running around here like chickens with our head cut off. But either no one called because no one gave a crap, or no one knew who we were and didn't care, or everybody was going to call. Yeah. And thankfully, it was the latter. And we then know, okay, it was like the Jaws moment. We're going to need a bigger boat. And that's actually, I sent that GIF out to everyone on the operations team. We're going to need a bigger boat. And ultimately, we were able to scale up in 6 days a full statewide delivery program. It wasn't perfect. Yeah. We had a lot of complaints, which we've worked through it. Now we have a full call center up here in Deerfield Beach. And we are, if I were to give you 3 words to describe our business model, it's authentic, we're premium, and we're delivery focused. And we're only opening 15 stores statewide. And if you drew a circle around all those 15 stores, you would see a 2-hour drive time. Unless you live in a national forest, we can deliver, once all 15 stores are open, we will be able to deliver cannabis to your home same day.
That's incredible. And I think the model, you know, and credit your team for doing this, delivery first is incredible, because not only that, it allows you to test the market before you actually buy physical real estate there. You can move a truck around. You know, you and I had talked at the C-Lab conference, and just realistically, the delivery first model really worked for you, because all in on a delivery truck versus all in on a physical dispensary, the costs were extremely lower.
much lower. I mean, you're looking at $24,000 on a van plus driver plus the product in the van versus anywhere from 6 to 12 months of permitting and conditional use process for dispensaries. Because remember, 98% of all Florida municipalities, given they have home rule, treat us as if we're building a condo on wetlands.
Yeah.
So in the city of Fort Lauderdale, for example, I have to go through site plan level 3 review. Same review a condo would have to go through.
Wow.
To build a 2,500 square foot dispensary. So, by the way, credit to the team and our attorney, Stephanie Toothaker, our land use attorney in Fort Lauderdale. We just had our hearing last week. We'll be the only dispensary on the east side of Fort Lauderdale.
That's incredible.
Right off 17th Street next to Publix.
Next to Publix.
Yeah. So it's,
get all your supplies in one run.
Yeah, Publix, Total Wine, TJ Maxx, us.
If we still had Blockbuster, it would fit perfectly in there.
Yeah, Blockbuster would have been good. There's a Five Guys right around the corner too, so
Even
I'm sure
better.
we'll feed them some business. But the delivery model is one that last year was the highest rate of closures of retail stores in recorded history. And we're the only industry that's running towards brick and mortar.
Yeah.
And I'm running towards, let's have brick and mortar where we can educate patients. Let's have brick and mortar where we can show people what our authenticity and our authentic culture is as a company and let us see our products. And then once you find what you like, we'll send it to your house. Which is what people want anyways. I know, I mean, just the Amazon guys at my house more than I am, I feel like. And for me, it was Mike Bondurant, to his credit, it was an amazing observation. That's why I begged him to come join me and leave, a easier job, because this is not easy to build this out. But it's also, I think it's an interesting point of differentiation in what we're doing. I get accused all the time of being a competitor or wanting to see other MMTCs in Florida not do well. And I'll be very clear with you. I hope they do great in their business. Right now, True Leave is Walmart. I hope True Leave crushes it as Walmart. They are the biggest. They are providing the most. It's not super high quality, but it's people like their stuff, and it's Walmart. I'm Whole Foods. And guess who owns Whole Foods?
Amazon.
There you go.
That is an awesome analogy. So here's the thing. One Plant does business outside of Florida too, which is really cool. One of the things that's always intrigued me about the cannabis industry is you have to operate a company uniformly, but in each state in which you operate, the rules are completely different.
Totally
so you guys are in Florida, California. Is it anywhere else yet?
No, transactions are pending, but there's nowhere else at present.
Okay, cool. So talk to me, what is the major difference between how you operate in Florida and how you have to operate in California? Because I know California, you don't have to be vertically integrated, so it's almost like running two different businesses under the same umbrella.
It's actually, be surprised it's not, because in any state I'm going to go into, I'm going to endeavor to be vertically integrated.
Okay.
So in California, we'll have retail stores, and then we'll also have our grow up in Humboldt, at Northern Emeralds. So in a sense, we are going to be, though not technically vertically integrated because it's not required. But why do I want to be vertically integrated? Why do I want to be in the business of growing? Because I want to have a lower cost of goods. If I have a lower cost of goods, I drive EBITDA. So, MedMen's model of just having stores everywhere, they're buying wholesale.
Yeah.
They're still going to have 25 or 30% higher cost of goods than I will if I grow my own. And because I have growers who know what they're doing and they're the best in the world, and with the standard operating procedures that I have, which are decades ahead of anybody else in the industry from Northern Emeralds, we can drive lower cost per goods. Just for example, we took the SOPs Northern Emeralds has. A lot of people go, who are Northern Emeralds? Well, great, they have great flower in California. In my opinion, the best flower in California. And what attracted me to them, though, was not the quality of their flower. When I toured their facility, they have written SOPs and they have data points across every phase of cultivation for every individual phenotype.
Wow.
So they know that for their Titan OG Kush, it needs to have this many days and hours of veg, this many days and hours of flower, the temperature and humidity percentages for both those stages of growth. And if you do that and follow it, you will increase your yields by 30 to 40%. So my team here goes, yeah, right. The growers here, these are all, P-Bud, ChemDog, Chris Keller, all those guys. They're going, yeah, right, dude. So we brought the SOPs, Cody and Tyler came down, we went through a whole thing. Our yields are up.
That's
25
incredible.
to 30% without spending an additional $1 of CapEx.
Wow. I love the way that you talk about this. And again, I've done a lot of research for this. And you were very big about fighting the stereotype of cannabis, that it's not just a bunch of hippies in cargo shorts and sandals. And this is something that I try to harp on a lot. I really want to expose the medical side of it. And, you know, I've heard stories about you saying, hey, you think it's a bunch of hippies and stoners? Come with me. Just make sure you put on your lab coat, hairnet, and everything else. And I love hearing you talk about it as a science.
It is a science. And that's what attracted me to Northern Emeralds is I went, man, you guys are actually capturing these data points. We're treating this like a business now. We're treating this, you know, everybody. I did an interview with Cheddar, the online news media stock, you know, in May. And I did an interview, and then I did an online interview, and then they wrote an article. And in that article, I was talking about our delivery model. I was talking about focusing on the bottom line and investing in our cultivation and our yields as opposed to my competitors. And I actually named MedMen. And I said, I'm doing the exact opposite of what they're doing. We'll see who's right. And it's funny, the Cheddar reporter reached out to me after that happened and went, that was a pretty interesting interview to look back on, because back then, I read MedMen's restructure report.
Yeah.
And one of their main bullet points on how they were going to get profitable, delivery. And I went, we were talking about that in February.
So, I mean, they essentially started out pure retail and then tried to reverse engineer what you were doing almost.
Companies get ahead of their skis is growing. You need to invest in this industry. Everyone invested. If you look at Harvest in Florida, if you look at MedMen in Florida, if you look at VitaCan in Florida, they all invested in stores first. That would be the same as if you owned a restaurant, only building out where the patrons sit.
Yeah.
Not building out the kitchen or maybe hiring a chef. So I went and built out a kitchen and hired the best chefs I could get, and then hired and partnered with the best team for SOPs on how to make the food, so that when the customer sat at the table, there was something there, and that I didn't have too many tables. Where you see us as a one store and 9 delivery vans now outselling companies that have 14 and 16 stores. That's because they didn't invest in their kitchen.
Yeah.
I got chastised by all the financial analysts and the capital markets guys and even my own partners going, why aren't you opening more stores? I go, because what am I going to put in them?
Yeah.
And it's the same feeling you get when you walk into some of these other competitors that didn't invest in their grow, and they have 2 products, maybe, and it's there once a month.
Or a sign on the door that says we're out of X today, which is very common.
Look at a company like Acreage, who I have a tremendous amount of respect for Murph being way out front and getting a guy like John Boehner to join. I mean, they've done a tremendous job in a lot of states where you look at what they did in Florida, they can't open here because they don't have grow.
Yep.
You look at MedMen, they're trying to operate out of a 5,000 square foot grow. Look at GTI, they're operating out of a very small grow. So you're going to see these guys get online. Their capital's coming back into the market, but to me it was very important, the integrity and the authenticity of our team, but more importantly, the integrity and authenticity of the purpose that we have for growing high quality cannabis. We had to invest in that first. Everything else flowed from that. And I just put it in my mind that, I'm going to take crap from all the analysts because I don't have the same sales numbers and I'm going to get kicked in the teeth. Look, I'm married to a very strong-willed Italian girl, so I get kicked in the teeth on a daily basis as it is. So I'm fine with that. And it's starting to see little bits of the fruit of those efforts start to come out. And we're just getting started. As we roll out, judge me by the end of 2020 what it looks like in Florida for us. Now we're just starting to see little tidbits where if you put last week's OMMU report and you look at what we sold out of our one store versus Truliev's busiest store, we're right there with them.
I see that report. I think it comes out every Sunday night.
Yeah.
And it's incredible to see that.
We're like the little engine that could down there that just is. Right now, I'm only showing percentages. Hey, look, based on my one store versus their stores, I have to do the percentages. When I have my 15 stores open and 25 to 30 delivery vans, it'll be real.
That's incredible. And like I said, I'm a fan because I think you approach the industry right. Like you said, you focused on product first. Even your branding, cannabis is kind of, I don't want to say cannabis is associated with cool for the smoking aspect of it, but it's always had to have not just function, but form too. People want cool logos and this, that, and the other. And I think the branding you've done with One Plant, the black and white color scheme, your logo, the One Plant logo, I wear this hat around town. I'm not just wearing it for all the podcasts that we do. Literally, you find me anywhere, I'm wearing this hat because it's a cool looking hat. But I know you have to go soon, so there's one more thing I just want to follow up with, right? You're very big on policy and everything. How do you think it plays out from here. I know you said that the way the government works is you have to chip away slowly, and all these bills are just going to start to chip away. Do we get to a tipping point where we've chipped away enough where they're just like, okay, let them have it? And how do you see this playing out nationally? Do you think Florida goes full rec before it goes national?
Or do you think we're going to get to a point where we're on the national spotlight where they're just going to say, hey, states do what you want, or everywhere we're going to be scheduled? How do you think this plays out from here? Very high level, because we don't have a lot of experts watching this show, but then...
Sure. No problem. So, I mean, it's a game of incremental momentum, is what it is. When I started this 3 years ago, I had to beg Haley Barker's lobby firm, BGR Group, to take me as a client. I actually had to have a couple of former
U.S. Senator friends beg them on my behalf. And my ask of them was, I'm not looking to get this done today. I understand it's not today. I understand this is a 5 to 7 year process, just in my experience in government. So we begin working on it on a daily basis, and we identified our goals. What's our first goal? Make sure Jeff Sessions doesn't put us out of business. So thankfully, one of the guys in Haley's firm was one of Jeff's longtime staffers, an old buddy from Alabama. So we went to work on the Department of Justice. And then it was, okay, how do we keep the Rohrabacher Amendment going? Which, for those that don't know, the Rohrabacher Amendment basically says the Department of Justice does not have any funds appropriated to it. It's a budget amendment. Does not have any funds appropriated to it to go after cannabis companies as long as they're complying with the state law where they operate.
Okay.
So the big news in 2018 was when Jeff Sessions rescinded the Cole memo on January 4th. I remember where I was when it happened. The news that got no work, didn't get any news, I should say, was 2.5 months later when myself and 2 other industry participants got the Rohrabacher Amendment passed again. So Jeff Sessions declared war on us on January 4th, and we completely defunded his war 2 months ago. No one seemed to really pick that up as news, whatever.
That's incredible.
Not looking, if you're a lobbyist, you're not looking for the news. You're doing most of your work anonymously. So then the next thing is, how do we deal with banking? Because everyone goes, why'd you choose banking first? Well, I chose banking because we had a tremendous amount of support from the Department of Treasury. They are looking at this, as are the states, going, we want to know how big this industry actually is, so wait for it, we can tax it. And you can't base that off some industry report or some model that someone put together. You need to get the money in the banks. When the money's in the banks, Treasury can look at it, and then you can actually figure out a tax.
Yeah.
So we had a lot of bipartisan support to go after the Safe Banking Act. At a time this is all happening, cannabis legalization, whether medical or recreational, begins going from the fringes of California. I don't mean to refer as anyone in California as being on the fringes, but if you're in D.C., you're looking out at the rest of the country, California, Oregon, Washington, fringes.
Yep.
So you start looking at fringe states, and then it moves to Ohio, Pennsylvania, Florida. States you can't win the White House without winning on the Electoral College. Then the noise got turned up, and it got elevated kind of from a tier 3, let's help these guys out issue, to a, we better have a cannabis policy if we're going to want to win the White House.
Yeah.
So I still think to this day it was Obama's one of his biggest mistakes was he could have fixed cannabis when he had the United government at the beginning of his term. He did healthcare, be that as it may. He could have done cannabis too, but be that as it may. We've got safe banking. Safe banking passes out of the House. It passes out of the House. Everyone great, but now it's got to get to the Senate. What I don't think anyone really paid attention to is on the same day it passed out of the House, they initiated the articles of impeachment, or the impeachment inquiry.
Yeah.
On that day, the same day that the Republican president had an impeachment inquiry launched against him, 91 Republicans crossed the aisle to vote in support of safe banking. That's a mandate by any stretch of the imagination. We were betting on 25 to 30 Republicans. And as I'm sitting there watching the vote, Chris, my marketing director, heard me yelling in my office. He's got a great video of me screaming and yelling as the votes are coming in. Because I thought there was no way that it was ever going to happen. Next step will be we got to get to the Senate. I think we had a great chance of getting it done in the latter part of last year. Impeachment inquiry took the oxygen out of the room. Okay. So you'll see it pass in 2020. Next after that will be the States Act, which we're working on. I actually had a chance to help draft that legislation and participate in the drafting of it. Brian Wanamaker at Senator Gardner's office drafted it, but I was very proud to be able to sit and work through them and give them industry feedback. We are presently working with Senator Crapo's staff to address some of his concerns, which we will, and that will ultimately get the bill teed up to move. States Act will probably be late 2020, early 2021. Okay. For those that don't know, the States Act is the states' rights bill that just basically says if it's legal in your state and you're complying with state law, your activities are exempted from Schedule 1. It actually amends Schedule 1 of the Controlled Substances Act.
And that allows for research too then.
Correct.
Very cool.
Correct.
Well, Brady, I know you have to go. You're a very busy man, probably one of the busiest men in cannabis. Thank you so much for everything that you're doing, not just for doing this podcast, for everything you're doing with the industry, from a lobbying side, and keep going with One Plant, man. I'm a huge fan and excited to see what you guys do.
Thanks, Todd. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Awesome.